I had an affair. I cheated on my husband 3 times before my lover, and I got careless and were caught. He didn't catch us, thank God. It would have destroyed him. Well, it would have destroyed him even more. It ended up destroying our marriage anyway, but at least he had no visual. No, we got caught by a coworker, one who resented our success and didn't hesitate to knock us off our pedestals. It wasn't like I went looking for it to happen. My therapist has finally gotten me to understand nothing just happens. You make choices every day of your life, and the consequences alter your life from that point on. She taught me one makes choices, whether or not one consciously recognizes them. So I had an affair. I'd like to say I was drunk, but the first time I'd had 3 glasses of wine the whole evening. He was very nice looking, and we had flirted lightly back and forth for almost a year. It evolved that we were on the same team, often doing projects together. We even joked about being work spouses to our significant others when we were all together, and everyone laughed. My husband grinned. Good. As official work husband, I passed the expense of her shoe fetish on to you. His wife got into the banter with us. Yes, and I passed the training of learning to leave the toilet seat down to you. We expect regular progress reports. We all laughed and hugged before we left the party. Oliver told me how much he liked them on the way home, and maybe we should invite them into our circle. They had just moved here and were eager to make friends, and we subsequently spent many pleasant evenings with them and our other friends, who accepted them without reservation. I will not bore you with physical descriptions like how big my breasts are or how well hung he was. What does it really matter? We were young, in good shape, fairly attractive, and let it go at that. And I'm absolutely not going to talk about love. My husband was the oldest at 30, the rest of us in our late 20s. I had a good job, getting it straight out of college and working my way up. Over the years, I'd had several promotions, and the old man, he was 70, who owned the company, often told me I was the daughter he wished he'd had. I became a team leader, something that required one night away on the average of every 2 months. I hated it, but hubby said it wasn't a big deal. I left on Thursday morning, spent the afternoon and the next morning in meetings, and was usually home by 4. We used to make love like we'd been apart for weeks when I got home, but as it became routine, it cooled. It wasn't like we were bored with each other. We were young and enjoyed making love 3 to 4 times a week, on average. Sometimes, if we were really busy, it may go down to once a week, but as soon as we had the opportunity, we tried to catch up. We dated for 8 months and lived together for almost a year before we married. We were together for 3.5 years as a married couple. The lovemaking came about after some pretty tense encounters, and we were both on edge. We had dinner together and split a bottle of wine. Oddly enough, the chief topic was about how much we missed our spouses and some of the future activities we had planned together as couples. A comment was made and agreed with on how that, when we were as keyed up as we were, love with spouses was the preferred means of decompression. I remember it being said, but I can't remember whether it was me or him that said it. Then it turned to light flirting, innuendos, and small touches. He joked that as work spouses, we should take up the slack of our real spouses. I admit it. He was handsome and always had the right words, something which made him invaluable on my team. We ramped it up, but in the end we went to our rooms alone. I was thinking about him as I lay in bed touching myself, using him for fantasy fodder, when there was a knock on my door. I put on my robe and opened it to find him standing there with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. We never finished the first glass before we were all over each other. In short order, we were on my bed, coupling frantically. Neither of us lasted long, but we lay there and caressed and cuddled until it was time for round 2. He left me at 3 in the morning. I collapsed back into bed and slept like a rock. I woke up at 7 feeling like I was suffocating, literally gasping for breath. I had cheated on my husband, shoved my vows into a dark corner of my mind, and rutted like an animal. I probably took the longest shower of my life trying to wash what I'd done away. He was subdued as well, barely meeting my eyes in our morning round of meetings. We were seriously ineffective that day. We didn't even sit together on the plane home. We danced around each other for 2 weeks before he came into my office and shut the door. We talked for 45 minutes. He apologized for coming on to me, and I apologized for taking him up on his offer. We agreed it was a one-off and we would take the secret to our graves. That lasted for 6 months. We had put the past behind us, I thought. I know I felt as low as humanly possible for about a month until hubby asked me point blank what was bothering me. Almost fainting, I recovered and told him it was work-related, not technically a lie. But I had resolved it, and the problem was a thing of the past. He frowned and then almost broke my heart. I'm going to call X and tell him to keep a closer eye on you. After all, if it was his wife and I could, I'd do the same. 6 months later, it was Christmas time, and we were stuck for 2 days in a northern town because of one of their biggest blizzards in history. Hubby and I talked a couple times a day, and he told me to let my work husband keep me entertained. He told me he and Mrs. X were going to the theater together to see the show I had been waiting for all year. He could tell I was upset. If it bothers you, we won't go. I'll give the tickets to her. Maybe her sister can go. I recovered enough to tell him it was fine, but he owed me a big surprise for next Christmas. He agreed and said he was already working on it. X and I commiserated, and he complained about how much his wife liked my husband. It's always, look how considerate he is. It must be nice to be treated like a queen. Did I tell you about the delicate necklace he bought her just because he saw it and thought how good it looked on her? I unconsciously rubbed the necklace, smiling at the joy it had given me. It was a total surprise, not my birthday, not Christmas, just because a neck as sensuous as yours deserves this. It will highlight the smoothness and perfection of your skin. He was not perfect, and had minor flaws that aggravated me to no end. Then I would see other couples in our group, how the women envied me and the men either admired him or were disgusted because he kept the bar so high. Then I'd just smile and hold his arm a little tighter. We ended up getting drunk and making love for 2 days. We were still at it when they called my room to tell us the airport was now open and we could go home. We showered together, sat together on the plane, and swore that while we enjoyed it immensely, it would absolutely never, ever happen again. 4 months later, we got caught. I know you want to know about love. It was love between two young, healthy adults. Yeah, it was good. Was it worth the price? No. Without going into detail, the fallout was tremendous. My boss called us both in separately. He was almost in tears when he saw me. I can't tell you how disappointed I am in you. You were the best of the best. I always admired your marriage. I thought it looked a lot like mine when the wife and I first started our journey together. Do you still have a husband? I nodded, not bothering to hide my tears. Yes, I was still married, even if I hadn't seen my husband in 2 weeks. Good. He was a fine man. I hope he has in his heart to forgive you. I have to protect my business, and cannot be as forgiving. You still have your job, but your days as team leader are over. You will never travel representing this company again, or represent it publicly, do you understand? I nodded, grateful I still had a job. I knew, though, that my days were numbered at his company. My star would never rise higher than I was right now. Somewhere down the road I would have to dust off my resume and hope he gave me a reasonable recommendation. X didn't fare so well. He left quietly in return for a reasonable recommendation. I was sure it was carefully written. Mr. X has excellent communication skills, works well with others, blah, blah, blah. I knew, though, that if any of my boss's friends considered hiring him, a quiet word would pass, and the old boy network would kick in. I sincerely believed that if we'd spoke, we would both have apologized for ruining each other's lives. We didn't, though. Our boss and spouses made sure of that. My husband, who I never heard raise his voice, told X in no uncertain terms that when he finally found him, he would wish he had killed him, because it would be a miserable, painful life from then on. X believed him and left for parts unknown as soon as his divorce was final. He left behind a devastated wife and 5-year-old son. I think it took her years to recover. 8 years went by before she married again, to an older man who dotes on her and her son. He asked the son what kind of car he would like for his 16th birthday, and broke down when the boy told him that what he would value more than a car would be the use of his last name. So with a stroke of a pen, X was removed from his life forever, and his new dad got him a top-of-the-line sports car, despite his mother's objections. X never saw his son again after he left. even though his wife tried to find him to remind him she had divorced him, but their son hadn't. I found my life suddenly divided into segments, eras, if you will. There was my life, BTA, before the affair, and ATA, after the affair. I remember BTA being full of light and happiness, and ATA being filled with grayness and despair. Mercifully, ATA didn't span near the time BTA did. Then it became time to choose sides. Other couples had broken up in our normally tight little circle, and the remaining couples didn't know how to handle it. Who do we invite to the BBQ, the nights out and the nights in? Gone were the casual flirtations and innuendos, afraid it would trigger terrible memories for the ones who were still around. I was kind of glad when we sold the house and went in different directions. I'm sure the other couples gave a sigh of relief, just not in front of us. The women in the circle were sympathetic to my plight, offering me support while making sure I didn't get close to their husbands. After all, I had already broken up one marriage that was happy, and there was no need to tempt fate. X fared even worse. The men were supportive while making damn sure he never ever came close to an intimate setting with their wives. There was a lot more support for hubby and Mrs. X. After all, they were the wronged ones, right? It wasn't their fault they found themselves in the mess their lives had become. Then I had to move to the TTPFF phase. Tell the parents, friends, and family. I disappointed both sets, but both forgave me, even though my marriage didn't survive. I still send his parents Christmas cards and a gift on their birthdays. They always send cards back to me, and after a few years, his parents would ask me to visit them if I came into town. I never went, but thanked them warmly for their kindness. The first casualty in the ATA era was our love life. We used to tease, tantalize, make slow, languid love or rut like animals as the mood took us. It took 3 weeks for hubby to move back in, and another 6 before we attempted any intimacy. It was a total disaster. We were both afraid, him of being compared to X and be found lacking, me of doing the wrong thing and triggering terrible memories. As the months passed, it got better mostly. We would try to pleasure each other when I would feel his body just shut down. I understood at first, but grew to resent it towards the end. Couldn't he see how hard I was trying? How much I loved him? We went through counseling, and it helped. It helped us to realize we were over. I'd broken his trust, and no matter how hard I tried, how much I worked to mend his heart, the wound was just too great. So in the year 1.5 ATA, we were no more. The divorce wasn't contentious, just a straight split right down the middle. I didn't even cry when I got the final papers. We would see each other from time to time because our town wasn't very large. We would always greet each other and be civil, but that was it. I remember how heartbroken I was in the year 4 ATA when I glanced through a cafe window downtown and saw him with a woman. She was smiling, sitting close, giving him intimate touches that every woman recognizes as ones reserved for a lover. I went home and cried my eyes out for the last time. I cast resumes far and wide and got an offer from a firm 2 states away. It was a good-sized step up and just what I needed. I told the friends I had left goodbye, kissed my parents, and moved on. Now I moved into the ATD after the divorce era. I thought about the counselor I'd seen for a few months after the divorce. She really helped me, not by being sympathetic or casting blame, mostly just listening. On our next to last session, she surprised me by lifting her blouse out of her skirt and pulling it down a little. There was a pretty big scar on the side of her hip. She straightened her clothes and sighed. We were young, 16 and 17 thereabouts, and my friend had gotten her older brother to get us some booze. It was mostly liquor, so it wasted us pretty fast. We had gone deep into the woods to keep out of sight and started a fire when it got dark. Not that big, and one thing led to another and then to dares, so one boy jumped the fire. Soon, we were egging each other on, and we were all doing it. I was on my 5th jump when I stumbled and landed on the embers on my side. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and this scar will never go away. I realized after I got my degree that it was a conscious decision I made to jump the fire. The more I did it, the easier it got until I got careless. This scar is my price. What I'm trying to say is that you made a conscious decision to make love to a man outside of marriage, and when nothing happened, when you realized you could get away with it, you did it again and again until you got caught. She paused a little before continuing, repeating herself. You did it again and again until you got careless and got caught. Understand? You can't rationalize it away as a spur-of-the-moment situation. Your choice to continue meant that even though you had jumped the fire a few times and felt safe, eventually you stumbled and fell. The scars you carry are on the inside, and they will never go away, but they will fade as time goes by. The next time you have to make a choice, remember to scratch your scars. I thought about that a lot over the next week before realizing she was right. I could have blamed it on X. He showed up at my door, but he didn't force his way in, and everything that happened once the door closed behind him was a mutual decision, just as the subsequent times were a simple decision on my part. So here I was. Divorced for 4 years now. I heard through family that hubby had found someone new. They had been married for a year and have a brand new son. I started dating about 6 months after the divorce, but there was no spark with any of them. I admit I did occasionally take one to bed just to get my needs met. Right after the last one left, I lay in my bed looking back on my life and realized I had to let the past go if I was ever going to be happy again. I got out of the bars and the meat markets, joined a gym, got involved in community activities. As soon as I was fit enough, I did 5 and 10K races. I never once finished in the top 10, but I made a lot of friends. One fellow runner, and I got along so well we trained together. Training led to coffee afterwards, then lunches, then dinners. We had dated 4 months before he let me into his bed. He was so attentive and caring that I cried after the first time. We were going strong 4 months later, and he was hinting about going up a level when I told him why I was single. I wanted him to see me as I had been and how I was now. I assured him I had been faithful to him from the first date, that the mistakes I'd made in my past were just that, mistakes. Mistakes I had had no intention of repeating. I didn't know it, but he had been married before, and divorced when he caught her having multiple affairs. In his head, once a cheater, always a cheater was written in stone, and the relationship died. I mourned for a while, but moved on. I found out the next year that God did indeed forgive us for our sins. More importantly, I found a man who could forgive mine. He was older by 7 years, but was lean and fit. We met at a race, both crossing the finish line at the same time. I was so happy I had finished, I did a little victory dance, lost my footing on the uneven pavement, plowed into him, and we both went down. Instead of being upset, he laughed. I landed on top of him, and we were nose to nose for a minute. I tried to apologize, and he grinned. You know, if you wanted my attention, you could have smiled, maybe flirted a little. Tackling was a bit much. However, I will forgive you over dinner tomorrow night. I hope you like French food. He handed me a card out of his gym bag. Call me and tell what time works best for you. It's a bit of an upper-end establishment, so wear a nice dress. I was still trying to form coherent words when he cupped my face in his hands and gave me a soft kiss on the cheek. Then he was gone. My running buddies were laughing hysterically. That didn't take long, did it? If I knew tackling a man would get him interested, I'd have given that hunky vendor a beatdown the first time he stopped by. Good going, girl. Did you know he's ranked the 4th highest desirable bachelor in the city? No. Well, good luck. The restaurant lived up to its billing. He was casually but sharply dressed in what had to be very expensive clothes, and the tie had to be pure silk. I had on my best dress, one that I had gotten at a tremendous discount because they ripped the hem. One of my hobbies was sewing, so I removed the tier by cutting it out and raising the hemline by a little better than an inch. I thought it enhanced my legs, and I must have been right the way my date was looking at them. The date went well, and so did the next one, spanning an 8-month period. He was fit, attractive, and I had lustful thoughts I hadn't felt in years. It was more than lust. It was turning into love. I hadn't felt so happy after making love since before BTA. It broke my heart, but I was truthful. He heard me out, handing me tissues and rubbing my shoulders as I cried. I tried to gauge his expression, and he seemed amused a bit. I'll understand if you don't want to see me. I'm not above telling you I've developed powerful feelings for you, and that if you continue to see me and it goes farther, I will sign any document, accept any prenuptial agreement you offer, if it means being with you. He hugged me gently. I know all about your former marriage and affair. Yes, I investigated you, invaded your privacy. Understand, I was falling in love with you and couldn't comprehend why such a beautiful and desirable woman was still single. So, you made a horrible mistake. But it seems you accepted responsibility and the price that goes with it, and that counts for a lot with me. He got up, going into his home office, coming back with a small box and a large envelope. He handed the envelope first. Read this. If you don't object after you're through, open the box. Before I asked for a pen, I read the papers inside the envelope twice. I signed on all the designated places and gave them back to him. I had just signed an agreement stating that I was on a 20-year probationary period, but if I fulfilled the requirements, it would be void at the end of the term. The contract had only one clause, that I be a loyal and faithful wife. I dropped the box on the coffee table twice before I got it open, crying as I slipped the ring on my finger. So then I entered my HEA era, happily ever after. I didn't deserve it, but I learned to live with it, and made damn sure over the years he knew I would never let him down. I went back home for a school reunion recently and ended up sitting with my ex and his wife. At first it was strained, but it had been 15 years. We ended up talking openly. I apologized one last time. He accepted it and told me he had long ago forgiven me because the anger and pain were just too much to carry around. I told him it had taken more than a few years to forgive myself, but I finally accomplished it. We spent the rest of the evening talking and showing pictures of our children. We had 2, both girls, and they had 3 boys. This is the moral of the story. Sometimes good people do stupid things. Even if they didn't mean to, even if they don't get caught, it will follow them for the rest of their lives. There will always be a little voice in the back of their brain that whispers, "What if this is the day they find out?" I was arrogant because I truly believed in the back of my lizard brain that if I got caught, hubby would forgive me. You all see how well that worked. I watch my girls like a hawk, and when they get old enough to understand, I'm going to tell them about my past and hope they have the maturity to learn from it and forgive me. I'm also going to tell them a story about scars. That's it. My therapist was right. It feels good to get it off my chest. Thanks for reading, and if I helped you make a decision that will stop you from creating a life-altering event, then good. If I didn't, well, that's all on you. If you consider it, think about how well you'll be able to carry the scars.